Hi guys! Rui Kodaka here. Guess what? I'm dead. The hunter got me. But I kind of have myself to blame, you know? Not just because of the things I did, but also because I could have figured out who the hunter was before it was too late. As you know, the hunter was really Takeshi Kizuna, the ultimate YouTuber. Or more accurately, an imposter pretending to be Takeshi. The reason why he agreed to run this game was because he wanted to get revenge for his son Shinji, whom I, well, murdered. There was actually quite a lot of foreshadowing and clues hinting towards that reveal from the very start of the game, all the way to the end of Chapter 5. At first, they were really small and subtle. Later, not so much. Sure, it's always much easier to spot them after you already know the twist. And it's not like there weren't many red herrings throughout the game. So it was definitely not an obvious conclusion, but it could have been solved. So, let's get through these hints and see how many you've spotted, shall we? Oh, and just to avoid confusion, we will be referring to the mastermind as Takeshi, even though that wasn't his real name. The first hint was given even before the game was released. See, in both Live or Die and Survivor's Guilt, every character has their official favorite song. And for both cases where we see two versions of the same character, Megumi and Takeshi, these songs are different. However, well, for Megumi, we went from Metallica to Megadeth, a very similar band. For Takeshi, we went from Darude Sandstorm to Judas Priest, so a very big change. And sure, you can easily explain that he was listening to meme songs as a YouTuber, and then got into dad rock later in his life. But it is the very first hint that these two might not be the same person. Now, let's get to Chapter 1. Here, there was only some very minor foreshadowing. First, at the introductory event, Takeshi is the one who speaks last. And right when Rika asks him about his son's name, they get interrupted by Monocrafi's announcement. The thing is, Monocrafi was afraid that Takeshi would slip up and say his real son's name instead of Luigi. So he stopped the conversation just to be sure. The second very minor hint happens during the discussion about Danganronpa Graveyard. Takeshi has a small emotional reaction when I mention Shinji's grave. And while for now it's small, if you look further ahead, you will see that whenever I say something about Shinji, Takeshi is always the one with the strongest reaction to it. Finally, the last Chapter 1 hint is something that only starts making sense later on. We see that during the beach scene, Takeshi has no scar on his stomach, which is inconsistent with the state of his body after the murder in Chapter 5. Moving on to Chapter 2, here we only have some minor hints. During the banquet, Takeshi becomes a bit emotional when talking about his son. For now, it's still nothing that a regular father wouldn't say. But you can notice that with each time his son is brought up during the game, his emotions only become stronger. On the second day, Takeshi approaches me to speak one-on-one. In a rare serious moment from him, he tries to cast suspicion on Gumi. The thing is, throughout the entire game, Takeshi has always tried to undermine Gumi's position. Sure, he wasn't as direct as Boslaw or Kazuki, but he was constantly trying to make others distrust her. He knew of her ability to act as a leader, and he saw her as a threat to his plans. Later, during the lore scene, we find out that Takeshi has no idea who the Yukawas were, even though they were very well known in the Survivor community. This surprises the others in this scene, but they quickly brush it off. During the trial, Kazuki becomes suspicious of Takeshi. He says that he might just be pretending to be dumb. Takeshi is not a good actor and a smart person can see that. There is something wrong with his behavior. But again, the topic quickly changes. Finally, during the last scene of the chapter, we find out that the hunter is holding someone captive. and that this person mentioned that the hunter looks like someone. This suggests the mastermind might be an imposter. While it doesn't point to anyone in particular, this knowledge puts some events in a different light. In Chapter 3, we finally get the first major hint, which is especially important if we already suspect that the mastermind might be impersonating someone. And the event where this is shown is none other than the Crash Team Racing Tournament. At first, we are told that Atsuo and Takeshi are the two best CTR players, and the favorites of the tournament. When they actually get to play, Takeshi is horrible. He loses to even Sumire, who has never played before. This isn't just him being rusty after a couple of years of not playing. He clearly has no skill and no experience. Also, he wants to race on Turbo Track, even though Atsuo says, correctly, that every CTR player knows that it sucks. Yes, this entire scene is comedic and not serious, which is why you wouldn't look for the hints towards the masterminds there. But it does show clearly, this isn't Takeshi, it's an imposter. However, there was also one smaller detail in that scene. When Hayato mentions how I murdered Shinji with a meat tenderizer, it's Takeshi who immediately tells him to change the subject. Every time when Shinji is brought up during the game, it's Takeshi who has the strongest emotional reaction. The third chapter has some smaller hints thrown in too. On the second day, Takeshi admits he doesn't even know who Junko Enoshima was. Yes, many DR survivors don't want to learn anything about the series, but all these little moments start showing a pattern. He never was part of the survivor community. Later, during a scene in the gaming room, Takeshi briefly says that his son is a TV guy. A small thing, but if you play through his Freezem events, he will also add that his son is a Danganronpa fan. And then he tried to tell his son that DR is bad, but to no avail. He literally tells me this out loud. Okay, back to the chapter. On the third day, we once again see Takeshi trying to get people to distrust Gumi. This time with Boslaw. And during the trial, once again, we see Kazuki accuse him of pretending to be stupid and trick everyone. This time, it's much more serious, and it almost gets Takeshi voted as the culprit. But fortunately, Alicia interrupts the trial, and then Gumi and I expose Boslaw's lies. So everyone conveniently forgets about Kazuki's accusations. Especially when Kazuki himself has a mental breakdown and dies in the next chapter. Speaking of Chapter 4, this is the first time where the hints get actually big and more direct. The biggest offender here is the scene where I talk about my DR season and how I killed Shinji. Once again, Takeshi gets emotional. First, he gets upset at me for killing my best friend. Then he becomes visibly sad, and then Atsuo says directly to our faces, "Oh, is it because the story reminds you of your own son?" And Takeshi confirms that. The devs were actually wondering whether they should include this moment in the game because it might make the twist too obvious, but eventually decided to keep it. Later at night, we see Takeshi completely lose his cool when Atsuo mentions his son. He shoots at him and me, as if actually wanting to kill us. Sure, everyone was on edge during this chapter, but this reaction to a simple remark from Atsuo was kind of concerning. We also get a second lore scene connected to the hunter, the one about the families of the host. It says that there were rare cases where those families weren't DR fans, and went depressed or insane after losing their loved ones, sometimes trying to enact revenge. Exactly like what the hunter was doing. And finally, we have the trial, and the first meta hint. In this chapter, Takeshi interrupts Atsuo during his speech, treating the usual RPG-style duel. These happen at least once in every chapter, and every time, the person fighting the player-controlled character used some attacking moves against them. But the animations of these moves were not selected at random. If we exclude the final fight between Hayato and Alicia, each opponent had a set of moves reflecting their personality. Mako, who was definitely stubborn, used slashing physical attacks. Sumire, the rational scientist, had futuristic shooting animations. Kazuki, obsessed with earthly goods, used the earth element. Hayato, wild and uncontrollable, had the fire element. And Aki, an unapproachable person opposing Hayato's fire, used the water element. So what theme or element did Takeshi, the funny middle-aged gamer dad, have? Well, darkness. All of his attacks were based on the element of darkness, because that's all that was left in his soul by that point. Finally, at the end of the chapter, we hear the hunter having an emotional speech, and his emotions correspond directly to what we've seen from Takeshi at the trial. He was shocked that Atsuo saved him, because he did not expect that a DR killer could ever save a life and not take it. And he was also greatly affected by the actions of everyone else. Mamoru, Kazuki, Kokoro, Gumi. He was starting to realize how the reality of the killing game could make all those people do what they did. And he couldn't allow that. He couldn't allow himself to sympathize with them. And that's when he decides to derail the game and create the giant sept that we see in Chapter 5. All to get the one person that he hated the most. And that's how we get to Chapter 5. Here, Takeshi's behaving suspiciously the entire chapter. It can no longer be ignored. Every scene he's in, every action he takes, is either part of his plan to take revenge on me, or him being unable to hide his true emotions anymore. Multiple characters comment on his weird behavior at various points, but apart from Gumi, none of them really suspect him. First, we have the breakfast meeting where Takeshi volunteers to be the new acting leader. This is contrary to anything he's been doing up to this point. While he preferred to follow others and obey them, like with Kazuki, he does this to control the actions of the group in this chapter. He is the one who comes up with the idea to ban everyone from visiting the final island. Obviously, because he wants to prepare his murder plan there. And again, Gumi notices later on that this was the thing that allowed the killer to remain unseen. Apart from that, Takeshi is the one who proposes the drone flying event, and he is also the one who specifically tells Alicia to try flying the drone, which is later used as evidence against her at the trial. But of course, everyone was focusing on the mysterious thing that he claimed he saw when using the drone, which was, obviously, a lie made up to make him look less suspicious. And finally, on the third day, he tells the group to not do anything before the final motive is revealed. Again, to give himself the freedom to move. So that's it for the hunter's plans. But what about his emotions? Well, these were on full display throughout the chapter. He can no longer act, and his obsession with his dead son affects him in every single scene he's in. First, we have the moment when I name Shinji as one of the possible masterminds, theorizing that he might still be alive. Takeshi freaks out, even more than at the previous mentions of Shinji. No one else has a reaction like that. Later, we have Gumi and me saying that Terminus might have kidnapped Takeshi's son to blackmail him. And Takeshi clearly answers, "No one has kidnapped my son." In fact, he says this 3 times in this chapter, and he is very specific with his words. Even when Gumi says, "You might be the mastermind, you listen to Terminus, and they kidnapped your son," the only part he objects to is the kidnapping part. He doesn't even deny the rest. And yeah, he's not lying. No one ever kidnapped his son. He left home of his own free will. We also have the scene where Takeshi breaks down in tears. He cries, wanting to see his son again, even though in reality he knows that this can never happen. He tells Atsuo and me that their last talk, when they had a fight, he says that this was the last time they spoke before the game, but he does not mean this game. He means his son's game. Then, at a sparkling love game, he once again becomes emotional at the mention of his son. We're used to this at this point. However, this time, there is more. Because after Atsuo gets hurt, Takeshi tells him to consider his parents' feelings. And he specifically says that they would be devastated if they lost him, and that no parent should ever go through something like this. He says that because he's speaking from his own experience. After that, he asks everyone to not mention his son again, because it makes everything that much harder for him. What everything, you might ask? Well, winning the killing game, of course. During his new FTE scene, he also says something else. He said that he can never protect anyone, and he doesn't even mean Atsuo. He means his own son, which also fits what he says next. That because Atsuo can protect the people he cares about, he's much better than Takeshi could ever be. Well, this is all we see of him before his supposed death, but we still have lots of hints during the trial. First, the one and only moment where I react to something that another person said, before the final choice, of course. It was when someone mentioned the meat tenderizer as a possible murder weapon. By the time, I already knew that this was all happening because of my murder. It was shown even more clear during my Red Truth segment, where I said that I'm a Chapter 5 killer. Just not this Chapter 5. The Chapter 5 in Danganronpa 50. I also say that his family will never see him again, which might sound as if I'm referring to Takechi's son as his family. But again, it was about Shinji's father instead. As in Umineko, you can't lie when speaking in red, but you can choose your words carefully. And even if someone knows nothing about Umineko, the fact that these words were written in a different color than the entirety of the game makes it clear that they are very important. There is also another meta hint during the trial. At the one moment when Alicia is choosing a truth bullet on her own, the 6 bullets actually represent the 6 chapters in order. The drugs, the lie detector, the bloody paper, the skate, my breakup with Hayato, and as for the 6th one, that one is called Takeshi's Suspicious Behavior. Finally, we have the scenes after the verdict. First, Gumi directly mentions the 5th chapter of the canon Danganronpa 1, where Junko, the mastermind, framed Makoto and Kyoko for a murder that she committed. But the thing Gumi does not say is who Junko killed. It was Mukuro, as in the person serving as the body double. And this is the exact same case here too. The mastermind killed his body double to frame the protagonist, only that I wasn't saved at the last moment. That kinda sucks, you know? At the end of the chapter, we see the usual flashbacks. First, there's Takeshi talking to his son. For some reason, the son isn't named, even though we have already been told that he's supposedly named Luigi. In that scene, the son is watching a TV show and he's really into it. Now, what show could that be? Oh, right! We have already been told in the FTEs that it's Danganronpa. And after that, the last scene with me speaking on the phone with the hunter, the mastermind says a very interesting line there. This horrifying, crushing feeling of powerlessness. It really hurts, doesn't it? And again, he speaks from his own experience. He had to watch the person he loved the most die, and he wanted me to feel the same before he killed me. But he didn't think it would actually make the choice that I made. Well, at least I managed to surprise him at the very end. The Ojin bonus story featured 2 hints, really evil ones. First, we got Shinji sprites. Did you notice that both of his happy sprites had the exact same smile as Atsuo's? remember what Takeshi told Atsuo in Chapter 5. That's right. That his son had the same smile as him. And just to rub this in, there's also the Mario Kart tournament, when Shinji changed his character, and he said, "I can be Luigi," as in the name of Takeshi's son. Now that was just being an asshole, Dev. And that should be all, right? Except it isn't. Because there was one final hint outside the game. It was so intently convoluted that it was basically impossible to find. But it was there. See, the trailer for the final chapter uses a cover of a certain song called "The Day After." This song has a single melody in all of its verses, and that melody comes back for a moment in another song from the same album called "Lament." And if we look at the lyrics to "Lament," then, oh man. Where have you wandered, my only child? Why are you not coming back? Your mother is crying her eyes out, and I, in my dreams, hear your voice. Father, will you take me away? Father, will you take and save me from my fate? Father, will you take me away? Father, will you take and save me from my fate? Damn you, Dev! Why did I have to get a screwed up writer like this? Anyway, this is all from me. I hope you enjoyed this video and the whole story of Survivor's Guilt. Thank you so much for all of your support over the course of its release. And see you in Acta S Fabula. Bye!